Welcome in. Pull up a chair. Join us around this roundtable. We're of course around the redraft roundtable. Grant, once again, you've joined us around this table here talking redraft fantasy football, and we are right on the cusp of the NFL season now. Games start this
Oof.
week. We are starting football. Football in less than 24 hours will be back. Grant, we
Mm,
finally made it.
mm, mm. It's been a long off season. Felt like it was. I feel like it was a really long off season, but also too, I felt like it was short at the same time. Kind of like parenting or doing anything else in your life, where it was like it felt like the days were long, but the overall time period wasn't.
Yeah, that's kind of how it goes. We get the dull days of summer where once you get past the baseball all star break, it's kind of wait and see and wait and see. But we are now
Yeah.
here at beginning football. And I think for most smart fantasy football players, we enter this season with our hopes in the drafts, hope that
Mm-hmm.
we picked the right players, our process was right. Um, but at the same time, with enough humility to say, hey, I'm probably wrong. So, how
Mm-hmm.
are we going to adjust with that? So, it's kind of hard to really talk about what trends we see from teams when we don't have anything from this season. I'm not a firm believer in, oh, let's look at what they did last year because this is a totally different year. So, I
Mm.
mean, I don't know if you have the same thoughts or if there's something different. I hear a lot of times of, well, this team did this last year and it's new. It's
Yeah.
all new now.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, every team does things a little differently. The big thing we have to think about is as most people have completed their drafts and you're getting your team settled in, maybe look at the waiver, doing last minute pickups or adjustments. A big thing you have to realize is that we drafted most of our players based upon their ceiling,
Mm.
right? So just keep that in mind of we drafted Christian McCaffrey 101 because of what he can do. We didn't draft him based upon okay, he's injured for 5 games and therefore so what we do is because of that we have to adjust expectations, right? We're drafting we're drafting quarterbacks higher, we're drafting receivers, CD Lamb, Tyreek Hill, all these guys really high to in order to we're showing like this is what their value is. This is what we as a fantasy manager want to have them as, and so this is where you have to adjust those expectations, which it can be matchup based, right? We can go through that a little bit, but I think it's important to and we can do this tonight. Is look at a player on a team and say, hey, you know what? Personally, I like this player, but I don't think they're going to do as well, or kind of a hot take, or something to kind of give our listeners an idea of, again, these are kind of personal opinions, right? But it gives
Yeah.
people a different perspective on a player than what maybe they've heard from draft boards all month.
Yeah. And I think it's also a sign of growth where some of the years
Mm-hmm.
past, I've listened to some fantasy football podcast and I don't agree with that person on this, so I'm not going to listen to him.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than understanding what was the process they came to understand that, so I think let's go through it a little bit and we'll just go game by game and highlight a player
Mm-hmm.
where what do we like based on how we drafted them or what we were hearing in the off
Mm-hmm.
season, and as whether they have a tough matchup or not. We still don't know very much because we're now at the point
Mm-hmm.
of being able to gather data. So, Grant, let's start Ravens Chiefs. We'll start on the Chiefs side. That is the favorite among us, but we'll start with the favorite. One player from
Mm-hmm.
Kansas City. As you watch the games based on drafts, what's one player who you're looking for? What are you looking for?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm looking for here is I think I'm looking at Travis Kelsey. Obviously, big name. He's 34 at this point. He's been top 10 fantasy tight end. I think since 2014, right? So, and he's been number one or number two. I think the last 8 years with number three last year. And so, for what I'm looking at is, does he kind of slip into this top 10 role again with his age, where just because of his chemistry with Mahomes, he's dialed in. he gets that like 50 yards, 5 catches type of situation going forward for a couple of years until he retires, or is he still going to be relevant? So to me, if you drafted him, you probably drafted him in the late second, early third, based on, everybody, unless you live underneath a rock, knows who Travis Kelsey is. So if you're in a family league or something, you probably got people who drafted him because they know his name, right? And so that's what I'm looking for from
Taylor Swift's boyfriend. That's who
Kansas
it
City
is.
is. That's right. You're right. Yeah, yeah. You put him on the map.
Yeah.
So the big thing is that's what I'm looking for with Kelsey. Right? Is we know Mahomes and him have a chemistry, but with this new batch of receivers, kind of new look offense, does he continue to be fantasy relevant, or is this like the last year that he's drafted in the top 3 rounds?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And I thought about going wide receiver here, but with the injury to Marquise Brown and the rookie Xavier Worthy, I don't know that we're going to see the full complement of how the receivers are going to be put out there till at least maybe week 3, depending on how long Brown is
Mm.
out with his injury. So I'm actually looking at Isaiah Pacheco and Samaje Perine. Um, all throughout summer, this was Isaiah Pacheco's backfield. It still is. But of course,
Mm-hmm.
we all know recently Kansas City brought in Samaje Perine from Denver, who was cut from Denver, but he is a very good complementary pass catching back. And I think Kansas City's entering the season with 4 running backs, rookie Carson Steele, and I'm forgetting probably one other name. But does Perine, does Steele, do they limit potentially the ceiling of Pacheco? Where now maybe we have to think late in our fantasy drafts of he's not potentially a bell cow, which that's, if we're honest, most running backs now in today's football, there's at least 2 guys. So how does the backfield look? Is it 70% Pacheco? Is it 60? What does it look like? What's kind of that split? So that's kind of what I'm looking at from the Chiefs side is the running back room and how does that, split off. So
Mm.
that'd be more what I'm focused on. So
Mm.
on the flip side, Ravens. Who are you
Mm.
looking at with the Ravens?
Yeah, so I'm looking at Zay Flowers,
Mm,
and by Zay Flowers, he finished. Obviously, last year was his rookie year, and he because of he's on a high octane offense with a flashy quarterback. What I'm interested in seeing is he finished as receiver 31
mm.
last year. And so what I'm looking at is, okay, we drafted him based upon his ceiling, what he can do. He's a rookie, he's getting the hang of the NFL, all this stuff. How high does he climb in that ranking with Lamar? Lamar won MVP with him being the 31st receiver last year. So, I mean, think about that is like, okay, how much like you might have drafted Flowers. He's Lamar's favorite target, but in reality, it's like okay, well, fantasy wise, um, what can he bring to the table, and how like what is his ceiling actually going to look like with another year of experience in the offense? Also, too, as we know, had some growing pains in that AFC Championship game where he had some frustrations and things like that that cost him big. So I think that's also a big learning moment, maturity moment with him, where he I think is going to come back and say, you know what, I'm ready to ball. I want to like get more serious. And does the introduction of Derrick Henry into that offense also limit him too? Because now you have 2 elite runners in that backfield. Like, does that drastically hurt the receivers?
Yeah. And you have Mark Andrews was also injured for late last year,
Mm.
so that'll kind of that's you're kind of then also by watching Zay Flowers, you're watching Mark Andrews to see what does
Mm-hmm.
that look like from being a complete team. So I'm going to pivot again to the running back. I'm going to say it's Derrick Henry, and while Derrick Henry is a big name, um, and he is aging for running back, what does he look like? Is he purely goal line use? Does he take a lot of runs away from Lamar? Does he complement the running capability from Lamar? Because now defenses can't just focus on Lamar because it's not Gus Edwards or somebody else that is obviously not the same talent as Derrick Henry.
Mm.
So I'll be interested to see what does that workload look like. How does he look in this new offense? An offense where he doesn't have to be the focal point, but he can definitely
Mm,
take some of the load. So I think it's a
yeah.
pretty complimentary role for him this year. So yeah, should be an exciting game. Of course, it won't be anything like the last time these two teams played, where 17-10. Could see a lot of fireworks, but also two very good defenses. So should be an exciting game to kick
Mm-hmm.
off the NFL season. But we this year have again a change where we have Friday night football now in the NFL this
Oh
year.
yes.
Friday night
Oh
coming
yes,
from
we do.
Brazil. And of course, we have apparently, I think the joke was you're not supposed to wear green at the stadium in Brazil. So, of course, we bring the Packers and Eagles there this year. So, all right, let's go Packers Eagles and Packers. What is one thing you're looking for this game, fantasy wise? Here,
Mm. I'm looking to see if Jordan Love continues his second half campaign that he did last year. Obviously, as everyone is aware, he did not start super hot last year. Finished though as QB 5, I believe, or 4 overall in fantasy with a strong second half surge. So what I'm looking for is, are the Packers going to come out firing against a good team with the Eagles? I think the Eagles have probably taken a little bit of a step back from where they were a few years ago when they went to the
yep,
Super Bowl, but they are still very good. So I'm looking for, can Jordan Love, is he going to make the progressions? Is his chemistry with Josh Jacobs good? Like overall, how does he look and how comfortable does he look? And if he can start strong in this game and score 25, 30 fantasy points in this game, man, it's going to be a high ceiling year for him, I think.
yeah, you're definitely drafting Love. You're hoping for that continuation of the hot finish to a hot start. So with that, though, we've heard all offseason about the Packers can run four wide receivers deep. They've got a lot of pass
Mm-hmm.
catchers. So I'm interested really in the target distribution. Do we see this as a
Mm,
fairly even distribution among the Packers wide receivers? Or do we see a leader emerge? Christian Watson, the big off-season story was the work with his hamstrings. He's apparently
mm,
fixing that problem that lingered him last year with his hamstring issue. So if all the wide receivers are healthy, what's the route participation and what's the target participation? What's that distribution look like? Because that will
mm,
start to clear up a picture of if wide receivers are running routes and just doing wind sprints, or if they're actually being a target and a focal point of the offense. So that'll kind of help
mm.
start solving that problem for us going forward. So
Good.
on the Eagles side,
Nice.
what are you looking for?
Mm. I am high, not like a hot take, but I think the value for Devonte Smith is fantastic. He
Oh yes,
finished 2 years ago. He was top 10 receiver. He finished as a, I think, receiver number 19 on the year for last year, and he was going anywhere between like the fifth, sixth, and seventh rounds this year, which for the value is absolutely fantastic. So
yep,
what I'm hopeful is, I think he's great value now. What I'm looking to see is just how Jalen Hurts and him have chemistry. Obviously, AJ Brown's top dog. We've seen
yep.
that based upon target share and fantasy points. But I think for the value, um, people look at Devontae Smith and say, "Oh, he's small. He's second receiver on the team." But I think for the value, it's fantastic pickup. And so I think that what I'm looking for is just seeing how well he does with this year, and kind of seeing, if you haven't drafted already, I definitely recommend getting Devontae Smith if you can.
Mm.
6th round value for 19 receiver off the board is great.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, and a lot better value than you had this time last year too. He was definitely a lot higher last
Oh, for
year.
sure.
So,
For sure.
um, this is going to kind of be an offensive as a whole philosophy. There's a lot of questions with Philly offensively. So obviously they brought in Kellen Moore to be the new offensive coordinator. we all know Sirianni is that CEO of a head coach. He doesn't really call the offense. He doesn't call the defense. So, last year they kind of went in shambles as Sirianni was trying to take over. Things weren't working. We saw the downfall from the Eagles. So I'm looking at what's the offense going to look like under Moore, who's seen
Mm,
success both in Dallas and then also with the Chargers. He's been thought of as a head coach. But then also with the retiring of Kelsey, the center, Jason
mm,
Kelsey, do they have the same philosophy where it's the same tush push if they get in close? Are they going to have that same minded? But by bringing in Barkley, do they kind of go away from that a little bit where they utilize a bigger back where they didn't have that last year and they can kind of change a little bit of their philosophy and become a little bit different look. So it's not
mm.
one particular, but I think it
Yeah.
affects everybody as a whole on the offense.
No,
So
you're right, and they have the star players to be able to perform. But again, it's all about the system. It's all about getting comfortable with the
yep,
coaches and the schemes and everything else. Yeah,
yeah. So I think that's my biggest one I want to see is just what does the offense look like. So all right, on to the
yeah,
Sunday slate
for
of
sure.
games.
And then,
Yeah, go for it. No, go for it.
oh no, I was just saying, like the first matchup that I was seeing on Sunday was Pittsburgh versus Atlanta, which
Ooh,
I think is an interesting one. Kind of a couple of different new look offenses. Pittsburgh for you. Who are you looking for on Pittsburgh?
Pittsburgh for me. I am wanting to see who is the wide receiver two out of this team.
Mm,
Arthur Smith offenses in the past. We've not really seen who that wide receiver. So he runs a lot of 11 personnel. We already know George Pickens is kind of that lead wide receiver. But who comes in as wide receiver two? Is it Pat Fryermuth or is it somebody else that is it Van Jefferson? Who's going to be that wide
mm-hmm,
receiver two coming out for this team? So that's really on
mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh who I'm looking for. How about
Okay,
you?
nice. For me, no, that's a good point, and I think this kind of correlates back to me is obviously the quarterback battle.
Yep.
Without trying to talk about that too much because it's been discussed ad nauseum. What I'm looking for from a fantasy perspective is I think the starting Pittsburgh quarterback, if Tomlin decides to go with one for the foreseeable future, right now that's Russell Wilson, is looking at streamable value for that position. And what I mean by that is Russell Wilson, he goes to obviously Denver. Instead of being a top 10 quarterback, he's between this like 13, 14, 16 range for rankings. But it's serviceable enough to where if you have a super flex league or a league where you have a bye, it's not a bad play for the matchup. I think we know that Pittsburgh's going to play like a nasty ground and pound game, but I think that Russell Wilson is going under the radar a little bit. Again, not somebody who you want starting every single week, but definitely something where if it's a favorable matchup and you know that potentially Pittsburgh could be playing behind if they're against a high powered offense or whatever, and Russell Wilson's back there, could be an option to get some fantasy points.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we'll find out if Russ was cooked or if he's
Mm-hmm.
got a little bit left in him.
Exactly. And so they're playing the Falcons in Atlanta.
Yep.
So for the Falcons, they have obviously a lot of new changes, new quarterback, new coaching staff, new everything. What are you looking for Atlanta?
I heard a lot, but I think if I'm focusing on one, is it Drake London or is it Kyle Pitts? Who's the lead
Mm,
target for Kirk Cousins? Who's going to be the lead target? So all off season, it was you're either on the Drake London or Kyle Pitts. There's going to be a resurgence from one of them, and here I'm looking at who's going to emerge as that target leader. We've seen in the past Kirk
mm-hmm,
Cousins has utilized tight ends from having Hawkinson or his days with Washington having Jordan Reed. Obviously playing with Justin Jefferson, the best wide receiver in the game right now, or at least one of the best. He obviously utilized him well. Drake London's not that same talent. He's also not terrible. So who's
mm-hmm.
kind of the focal point? Is it from a passing? Is it London or Pitts?
That's good. Yeah, especially with I like it too with Kirk Cousins too because I mean Kirk's been able to feed Justin Jefferson the ball for a while.
Yeah.
With if Drake London emerges that role, could he be a top five receiver this year? Yeah, that's good. For me, I am probably going for the obvious choice here, which is Bijan. But for fantasy, very relevant. I think Bijan
Yes.
is the new hot ticket for running backs this year. Obviously, his rookie campaign, he amassed almost 1,500 yards between rushing and passing, receiving
Mm-hmm.
yards. And, with Arthur Smith's offense, that honestly was head scratching at times. So, with both the offensive coordinator, head coach, and overall team staff repeatedly saying they're scheming around him, they're getting him involved. There's little sound bites of Bijan talking and saying, "Hey, I'm excited to be involved as a part of this offense." He's pumped. Most leagues, Bijan was probably the first or second running back off the board, so you're drafting him at that potential. So what I'm looking for is he worth the price? Is he going to be this like top 10 running back every year and value slips to like that second round, maybe early third, or is he going to be this top 5 running back that might end up taking over McCaffrey's spot if McCaffrey gets older and gets more injured?
Plus, that'll, by saying, is he going to be top or is he going to slip? You're then also asking
Mm-hmm.
how much work does Tyler Algier get? So you're also looking at that by
Yes.
focusing on what Bijan's able
Yeah.
to do. So I like that.
Yeah, and from a real football sense, like the Falcons, they had an incredible talent with Bijan. They're using Tyler Algier a lot in goal line situations, and
Yeah.
fantasy wise, obviously, it was very frustrating. But from a real football perspective, too, it didn't make sense because Bijan would be clipping down the field, and all of a sudden Tyler Algier goes in, gets used 2 of 3 downs for instead of 20, and they kick a field goal or something. So I mean, there was a
Yeah.
lot of head scratching, not just for fantasy owners, but for real football too. So I'm excited to see if they make him this true like old school like 2010 fantasy bell cow where he just does everything, or if it is more of a again like first second down and then Algier becomes more like a James White type of situation with Kirk Cousins where he just kind of helps get the third down and gives Bijan a break.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's good. I
Yeah,
like that.
for sure. All right. Yeah, so next game we have here is Arizona Cardinals versus the Buffalo Bills. So Cardinals at Buffalo.
Mm.
So I'll start with the home team,
Yep.
Buffalo Bills. Who are you looking for fantasy wise? Who you want to check out this year?
I'm interested honestly in seeing how Keon Coleman does, the rookie wide receiver.
Mm,
So he was not particularly a wide receiver I was high on coming out of this draft. I think he got overdrafted a little bit. But just because I may be down on someone doesn't mean I'm going to be right. So he didn't really flash in the preseason, which that's not an indication that he won't do well. So I'm kind of looking at how is he utilized? Is he able to be that top target for Josh Allen? And if he's not, that means somebody else is. So is that Dalton Kincaid
mm,
or is that somebody else on that wide receiver room? Khalil Shakir comes to mind, all
mm,
of that. So I'm interested to see how Coleman steps up. If he's able to step up and not be the Stephon Diggs replacement, but be that top wide receiver for the offense that they need. So that's what I'm looking
mm,
at. How about you?
that's good. Yeah, same with me. I think that kind of leads into my player who's Dalton Kincaid, which
Okay.
in a tight end starved economy we have for fantasy football, right? It's all right. He came as a rookie last year from Utah. Was splitting snaps with Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox gets injured. Kincaid plays some more. He finishes a tight end 11 on the year, which
Yep.
is not great. It's not bad. It's
Right.
serviceable, right? But now with Josh Allen not having star receiver talent anymore, and Kincaid having that year of experience, and Dawson Knox probably most likely, being used sparingly, and Kincaid being the primary tight end at that 5th round, 6th round value that most people drafted him in. It's like, all right, is he going to be this like, probably tight end, I don't know, 6 to 10 range, which
Mm-hmm.
is for a fifth round value, like okay for a tight end, or is he going to end up being like a top three tight end? I just think based upon volume and how good Josh Allen is at throwing the football, I think he's going to be a top three tight end, and I think it's a really good value personally, fantasy wise. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll have a lot of answers. Questions start to answer with how we see the
Mm.
Bills. How about then? So
Yep.
road to the road
Eggs.
team,
Mm-hmm.
Arizona with the Cardinals. Who are you looking at here
Mm-hmm.
for the Cardinals?
Man, honestly, rather than take the obvious answer, I'm looking at kind of what you did with the Eagles as like the offense as a whole.
Okay.
I don't know when the Cardinals are healthy. Um, the problem is the team itself is just bad. The defense is bad. So I just don't have a lot of faith. Like I understand that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to get volume. Kyler Murray's healthy, and can run really well. Like he can do decent fantasy wise. But I just the offense. I feel like every single year there is an injury that happens that just sets the whole. It just sets it all back. And I feel like every single time that we see a player, if it's Zach Ertz from a couple years ago
Mm-hmm.
or whatever it is, like it doesn't matter what happens. Like no one can really like live up to their ceiling or their draft potential with Arizona, minus Kyler for a few years. So for me, it's more the offense as a whole. Like, are they able to come to Buffalo? They're probably going to lose that game, but can they score 20 points on the Bills and give up like 28 or something reasonable where they seem competitive?
No, I like that. And kind of go along with your point of do Cardinals players pay off at their ADP? I think Kyler was really the only value we saw from an ADP wise, as far as like the biggest value. But I'll kind of tie on to that of we saw Marvin Harrison drafted pretty much at his ceiling, where he
Mm-hmm.
was going end of one in some leagues, the second round or second third round. He was going really high. I want to know. We didn't see him test. We obviously he is the son of a great wide receiver. Obviously, he put up numbers at a very good school for football at Ohio State. We saw him be able to do well in college. He did phenomenal, but he didn't go through the offseason rigors that every other wide receiver in this draft class did go through. He got drafted very high, so my thing I want to watch is against a good team, does he pay off? Or
Mm-hmm.
was there something missed by not having a complete
Yep.
picture? So, not saying he's not phenomenal talent. I think there's enough to raise questions of is that high draft capital going to pay off? So, that's what I'm looking
Yep.
for.
Yeah. No, good. It's a good question. I think that's something we're looking at, and a lot of people avoided him on purpose because of that, or they picked him right because the
Right,
ceiling was high.
right. Absolutely. So, all right. Who you got next up for Sunday for the
Yeah.
games?
Yeah. So next, I've got probably another potential snoozer. We'll see, but we have the Titans at Chicago, which could be a battle of a maybe a team that's not super exciting versus one that has potential but has it's Caleb Williams' first game. So I'll
Yep.
let you, since you drafted a lot of Bears players in several leagues I know that we're in. So I'll let you start with Chicago and see who you're looking for and what you think.
Yeah, I did in our home league. I did draft a lot of Bears. I have Caleb Williams and DJ Moore stack, so we'll see how that goes. But hey, in a super flex, Caleb Williams in the seventh round, I will take that all day
Mm-hmm.
long. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
uh, what I'm looking for, one thing, I I want to know. I'm going to go back to. I'm going to switch it up though to the running back room. We have the team that traded for DeAndre Swift this offseason. He was taken pretty early in the offseason by Chicago. But it's also Swift's third or fourth team in as many years as he's been playing. That's not a good sign for the running back as far as productivity stabilization. So they also have Khalil Herbert and then second year back Roshan Johnson. I think I'm going to go. I think I said earlier in our offseason when we talked about Chicago, I could see Roshan being a sleeper this year and coming out
Mm,
of this backfield leading it. So I'm really looking at the backfield and how does that really play out? Is it majority Swift? Do we see a rotational a backfield where they're going to rotate the backs? Again, this is a new offensive play caller who, with Seattle, used multiple backs. So
mm,
I want to see what does that backfield look like. I'm not sold that
mm,
Swift is going to be that lead back. I think it could be more of a rotation, but I'm still holding on to. I think Roshan's going to be a sleeper this year, so I'm going to hold on to that.
mm. Nice, nice. I think for me, for Chicago, it's honestly just going to be the different running backs and how they interact with each other. They got drafted all over the place,
Yep.
and between DJ Moore, who is a veteran, Keenan Allen, who's been a stud with the Chargers in either San Diego or LA for years, and newcomer from Washington, Roman Dunze, there's a lot of talent there with a rookie quarterback, which um, that's going to be something that I want to look at for this year is just kind of keep track of who Caleb Williams is favoriting. You
Mm-hmm.
would think he's going to lean on veterans. You would think a little bit more heavily
Right.
than rookies because he wants consistency because he's trying to figure the game out and get the speed. When you have a veteran who has that extra like sixth sense type of thing that can feel the game and be in the right spot at the right time. Not saying Roma Dunze doesn't have that, but it helps when you have someone who's been in the league for 10 years to help kind of guide a quarterback to, not, be able to pick up first downs and help them get more confident more frequently.
Yeah, and I mean, it could be a case of what does it look like with all three, but then does that change if there's either an injury or does it change just naturally? And then there's an odd one out where then is two main ones. I think it's a good thing.
Mm.
On the flip side for the Titans, what are you looking for?
Yeah. For me, it's going to be honestly how Will Levis throws the ball to his receiver core. You've got Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, and Tyler Boyd, which is kind of if you had told me that 5 years ago, I'd say, "Wow, crazy! What elite wide receiver one, room." And now, obviously, these guys get older, unfortunately, like we all do, and you have a room that is a bunch of veterans that have a lot of experience and are probably, other than Ridley, on their decline, trying to claw out some good viable years. So to me, it's like looking at Will Levis coming in and saying, all right, he had his rookie campaign, he's coming back for his like first full year, right, of his second year, I guess technically. But
It's first full
seeing
year though. He
how
didn't start last year right away.
yeah, you're right. First full year, but second year in the NFL, and so seeing like if Ridley becomes his top target, if he really goes for DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, there's a lot of variables involved in just understanding like on that receiver core, like who's going to throw the ball to.
Yeah, and I think like unfortunately Tennessee starts with a very not so easy schedule to
Mm-hmm.
begin with. So if Will Levis comes out and looks decent, I think that's something to remember and just pay
Mm-hmm.
attention to. That the schedule gets
Yep.
lighter after their bye. So I think that's a good call out. This
Yep.
Tennessee is one that I had as an ambiguous backfield where we don't know was it Tony Pollard, the newly acquired running back from Dallas last year, who disappointed in a bell cow role, or is it Tajay Spears, who alongside Derrick Henry was kind of that lightning to the thunder that Henry was. But again, these are two pass catching running backs. They profile pretty similarly in what they do. So is there an even split with them? Do we see one get a little bit more of the workload? This is going to be one where, yeah, an ambiguous backfield, not sure. You drafted one potentially if you're of that thought, and so now it's a how does this play out? And deeper leagues,
Mm-hmm.
Pollard or even Spears, maybe an RB2 or a flex if they need to be. So, I mean, this is
Mm-hmm.
players that will have starting potential depending on your league starting this week. So
Yep.
it'll be something to pay attention to.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Next game is New England at Cincinnati Bengals. I'll let you start
Oh,
with the away team, the Patriots. Who are you looking for?
on the Patriots. There's not a lot of hope, I don't think, in New England this year. So,
Yeah, yeah,
unfortunately, is Ramondre Stevenson going to be able to run behind that offensive line? It's not a very high
yeah,
productive offensive line. So does that hurt his value? And if it does that raise Antonio Gibson's value as a runner and a pass catcher? So Cincinnati's not the most daunting defense that they're going to face, but for sure it's not a pushover either. So I'm kind of
yeah,
watching the run game as what can we expect? And if you drafted Ramondre Stevenson, he was typically zero or hero running back build, uh, pick. So, how much trouble are you in? And you have to pivot pretty quick, or are you gonna feel pretty okay with that selection?
yeah, yeah. For me, I'm looking for Jacoby Brissett was named the starter, of course,
Yep.
and what I'm looking for is how long does that last? Does Drake May get involved? Is he just another Mac Jones, right? Is he just like
Yep.
another guy who looks good on paper and can't translate to the NFL? Is he the next potential Tom Brady waiting the wings for the Patriots? So to me, we know what Jacoby Brissett is saying. We know what his ceiling is. We've seen that from in the Colts and other teams that he's been on. So if the coaching staff is saying he's our best shot to win games, to me that's either one, Drake May is all over the place, or they think that they want to give him some time to get acclimated so he's not doesn't have PTSD from a la Bryce Young treatment, right? The
Yeah.
first year in the NFL. So that's my thing is like the coaching staff doesn't they don't want him out there for one or two reasons. Either one, he's not as good as advertised, or two, they want him to have a year behind a veteran like Brissett to like, all right, we're honestly taking the L this year. We've got our franchise quarterback in the wings. We're gonna really work on getting some offensive line with our picks next year, knowing that we're not good and moving on. So that's what I'm kind of interested to see from the Patriots if they actually get off of Brissett, make May start, and if May looks good.
That's a good one. And I think, yeah, you're either in the camp May is good or he was better than advertised and he's not going to be very good. So, on the flip
Mm-hmm.
side, what are you looking at for Cincinnati?
Oh, Cincinnati. I'll go with the obvious one here, which is the whole Jamar Chase situation, which is he supposedly practiced in pads today, supposedly, and that's all the drama right now. But to me, it's saying, okay, he has spent absolutely no time doing any kind of training with the team, and you're seeing CD Lamb, who's in a similar situation, being held out of practices, still getting warmed up, kind of getting acclimated back to full speed practice. So to me, it's saying, okay, unless you drafted like tonight or yesterday when his draft stock is ADP is falling right dramatically, expecting him to get a couple games where he's not playing. My question is like, all right, is if you picked up T Higgins, like
Ooh,
if
yeah.
if Chase doesn't play that first week, do you try to trade T Higgins at his ceiling and say, hey, he's the receiver one for Joe Burrow? Joe Burrow says the best he's ever felt this whole season. Do you try to trade bait T Higgins, knowing that Chase might come back to get some extra value in a position that you didn't draft well in?
Yeah, and that's Chase's a lot of times, even though his draft stock's falling, he's still typically taken first round or early second. So you still have to spend a lot of draft
Yep.
capital on him and
Yep.
potentially have to
Yep.
be without him week one. So, and if like you said, if you drafted T Higgins, which you drafted him in our home league, so there's potential value there pretty late for pretty decent offense. So I like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna go again with this backfield. It's another ambiguous one. They acquired Zach Moss, who was a leading rusher last year for the Colts, while Jonathan Taylor was hurt or held out. But they also have Chase Brown, who was pretty controversial coming out of college. Was he actually good or not? Because he didn't actually do well in college till his fifth year. So There's some question marks with him, but he also has some upside. So, what does this backfield look like? Is it Zach Moss? Is it Chase Brown? Those were pretty polarizing in the offseason. So, you made a stance, obviously, if you drafted one of them. So, how does this backfield shake out
Mm-hmm.
again? I feel like I'm going running back heavy in my takes here tonight, but that's okay.
No, it's good. I mean, I think I've been doing receivers or quarterbacks, so it's worked out well. All right, so the next matchup we have is going to be a good spicy matchup. I think for week 1 is Houston at Indianapolis Colts,
Yes.
which we obviously is a late season. I think it was a week 18 matchup that determined a playoff spot, if I do recall correctly.
Yep.
So to me, Houston and Indianapolis, the hype for Houston's been insane this offseason. Who are you looking for from that offense that you're either got a hot take on or someone that you like this season?
Let's see. I could go with the obvious one here, I guess, is that wide receiver room. Brought in Stephon Diggs, and so they already had Nico
Mm-hmm.
Collins and Tank Dell. So, what's kind of going back with the Green Bay situation? What's that target share look like? If it's not Stephon Diggs, do we see kind of a, we've seen in the past, is it kind of a throwing a fit till he gets the targets? Um, also, health. Last year, both Nico and Tank Dell were not healthy all year. They dealt with injuries. So, but CJ Stroud has been on record where he would take Tank Dell as a slot wide receiver amongst any wide receivers he could. So he's obviously got some praise there. So, um, I don't have a bold take on this. I think if I would lean one, it was always Tank Dell, because he was the
Mm.
favorite target of CJ Stroud. I didn't take a lot of Houston wide receivers in my draft because it I didn't see the value pushing them up high because people know the name Diggs very well, and it was one of those, the value was not there, but I would probably say I'm looking at that wide receiver room and who comes out of that. So,
Mm-hmm.
how about for you?
Hmm. Yeah, I think for me, I'm looking at more of like the tight end position.
Mm,
Dalton Schultz, when he's been with Dallas his first 6 years or so of his career, and then he went to Houston last year. Still finished as a tight end 10 for the year, and I think he's a position where because of this new offense, there's a lot more targets. I think he is a good pick. Especially he was probably drafted in rounds 10 plus in most leagues. So I think that being able to grab him or even trade for him or look for him on the waivers, honestly, a lot of times he might not even be there in like 8 or 10 man leagues. But I think, like you mentioned, the offense is good. There's a lot of targets going around, which I think a lot of defenses are going to focus on the receivers. And I think
yeah,
that Dalton Schultz, I'm not expecting him to be top 3, but I think he can maintain that 9 to 11 tight end range. And if you went like a zero tight end build, whatever you did, you could probably either trade for him cheaply or pick him up off the waiver. I think get good value for him at that position.
yeah, I like that. So,
So
you,
Indianapolis Colts.
yeah, what's your hot take there? Or what's your thing you're looking for, I guess, not necessarily hot take. What's
Man,
the thing you're looking
so
for?
yeah, so with the Colts, I think my hot take is I think Jonathan Taylor is going to take a step back,
Ah,
and that's probably I think not that he has an injury bug and you shouldn't draft based upon previous injury, but I think just the way that offense is set up with if Anthony Richardson is healthy, right? I think it's going to take away from the value. We've seen Jalen Hurts do that with a lot of different running backs with the Eagles over the years, where not necessarily there it's making the running back regress heavily, but enough to where like short yardage, it's first and goal from the 1. Well, a lot of teams run with their main guy and score, and Anthony Richardson might run it with his feet, or he might do something. And I just feel like that Jonathan Taylor, not saying from a running back, like a real football perspective, I'm saying from a fantasy perspective, I think he's
Right.
getting less points because Anthony Richardson's healthy.
No, I could definitely see that. And running quarterbacks can hurt running backs a lot more than non ones,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. I'm going to go with I've been pretty high on Anthony Richardson this offseason. In a limited, very limited sample size that we saw last year in what, 3 games, not even 4 games, he was the number one quarterback by points per game. And again, super limited size as far as what we got for data. But can that carry over? Does he understand
Mm.
now how to keep himself healthy? Or is this going to be another RG3 season? But then does his passing improve? Meaning, he was not the most accurate passer last year as well. So does that improve at all? And is he able to build on that? It's a good offense. Obviously, we saw Gardner Minshew do very well in leading this offense almost to the playoffs. So the pieces are there. Can Richardson capitalize on that, or is he going to continue to get injured and we're just going to see RG3 out of him again? So that's kind of what I'm looking for
Mm.
here.
Nice. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's something that we need to look at is the hype on him is high. I'm hoping he stays healthy. Just going to be interesting how he affects the rest of that Colts offense.
Yep.
Um, all right. So the next game we have is Jacksonville Jaguars at the Miami Dolphins. So
Oh
starting
boy.
with uh, the Dolphins, who are you liking? Who's your hot take? What's your cold take with the Dolphins?
Mm. I'm gonna go with I want to. I'm gonna go back to the running back room and kind of split. We see Devon A. Chan, who last year on some weeks he broke fantasy, where he was able to score over 50 points in a very limited role, but then also was injured. Kind of, he was out for a while. So is he able to pay off? It's kind of a risk. But also then Raheem Mostert, he was the number 2 running back last year. He didn't get taken until almost the 9th or 10th round a lot of times. So does he get? Is he able to continue it? Or did we see also the rookie Jalen Wright take a step forward if
Mm.
one of these two go down? Or if they don't, I mean, this offense is a very good zone run heavy scheme that does very well for all three of these backs. So how do we see this play out? So that's kind of the thing I'm looking for.
Mm. I think for me with the Dolphins, it's going to be Jalen Waddle.
Mm-hmm.
We saw him 2 years ago taken as a top 10 receiver. His draft stock reflected that. He was second or third round overall. People were expecting Tyreek to regress a little bit and Waddle to kind of, them to be kind of this 1A, 1B punch.
Yeah.
Well, last year, what happened was Tyreek flew off the handle, became number 2 player overall in fantasy, I think, and for the entire year. And Waddle fell to receiver 33, 34 on the year. And so we're still seeing Waddle because of the high powered Miami offense draft in the 4th round, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's like, okay, remember we talked about and like with like other receivers and what their value was and things like that. It's like, okay, looking at Waddle, it's like I think that there's still a high price that we're putting on the Dolphins offense, similar to the Chiefs, I think, where
Yeah.
the name is carrying the player a little too much. And
Mm.
Waddle clearly, his role in the offense, it appears to be more of this, kind of receiver 2 spot, more compared to this 1A, 1B. Obviously, understood that he missed some games because of injury last year, but still, like when he was playing with Tyreek, he wasn't the same level as he was in 2022. So that's kind of what I'm keeping my eye on is like looking at Waddle and seeing if he drops or if he kind of is at the draft at the same level that he was at earlier this year.
Yeah, that's good. And of course, nobody really does too well when it's 17 below zero or whatever the last time we saw him play. So that shouldn't be a factor in how we're
Yeah.
evaluating what they're able to do. So, how about for the Jacksonville
Yeah.
Jaguars?
Mm. I think for me, it's going to be Trevor Lawrence and how well he's going to be able to throw the ball. He has been in this eight. I think he was eight. Quarterback number 8 2 years ago. He was quarterback 13 last year, right? And based on he's has different. He has a retooled receiver room, of course. ETN
Yep.
is still there, but interested to see if Lawrence can break through and actually do something substantial, or if he is in most fantasy leagues like stuck in this streaming quarterback or like by quarterback role that he will be in if he's to take the step forward or not.
Yeah, no, I like it. And to kind of piggyback off that, I'm going with the wide receiver room where I'm interested in how is Brian Thomas Jr. utilized. We talked about a little bit off season, but he was the best 9 route runner in in college coming out of the draft, and that was Trevor Lawrence's one of his best throws. So obviously, last year, the wide receiver room was plagued with the most drops. They had the most potential touchdowns taken away. So that limits the production, of course. So then now our view on this team is well, they don't score very much. We're kind of down on them. But by getting the right people in the room, do we then have the ability to kind of change our opinion? So it kind of goes off the Trevor Lawrence where do we see this wide receiver room step up a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Good point. Next game we have here is probably the most exciting, definitely the most expensive game to attend on this week 1 docket, which is the Carolina Panthers at New Orleans Saints. A real
Oh,
barn burner of a prestigious, high market, high value, much anticipated matchup.
hey, this could
It
be
is a
for the
divisional game, which
division.
is
So,
exciting.
yes.
It is a divisional game, so that is something going for it. But overall, yeah, I mean, it's probably one that you're going to take a nap
Yeah.
through. So starting with Carolina, I think for me, what I'm looking for is probably the obvious one. There's not a lot of bright spots. This offense is Bryce Young. He really got thrown into the fire. There's the debate all year was, does he suck? Is the coaching bad? Is the offensive line bad? Are his receivers bad? Like all these, everyone's like pointing fingers at what the problem is. So to me, it's going to see, okay, does he come back? Is he more poised? He was running for his life the entire year. Is the offensive line able to give him some more time to throw the ball? Is he able to also make better decisions too? Is it going to increase probably for the 2025 fantasy year the draft value of Carolina players?
I think also to keep in mind is he has his coach was the offensive coordinator for Tampa Bay last year, who brought the best out
Mm-hmm.
for Baker Mayfield. Before that, he was with Seattle. He brought the best out with Geno Smith. So I think that's kind of right in line with what's been talking about all offseason is can Bryce Young step it up and can he turn it around? Does
Yep.
this team start turning it around? Um, I'm not going running back here. I don't think this running back room gets interesting till Jonathan Brooks comes back. So I'm not obviously if you drafted Chuba Hubbard, good for you. You have a serviceable RB2 for the first however long he's there. So I'm actually looking at Deontay Johnson. Of course, he was brought in from Pittsburgh last year, but we saw Johnson's production start to have a decline the past 2 years in Pittsburgh. And that's after kind of a high. So is Johnson kind of that target leader? Is that number one? Is he able to pick some of that production back up in a new offense? Was this something that he and Pittsburgh just didn't get along? Or is this something with the player? Obviously, his draft capital fell for us this year versus other years, but I think it's kind of warranted to, kind of question are which Deontay Johnson we're going to see? Is it the kind of that we saw the last couple of years, or is it kind of
Mm.
revamped here? So, how about for the New Orleans Saints?
Mm. New Orleans Saints. Well, um, I think with New Orleans Saints, it's going to be interesting how I don't know. Like it's going to be interesting. I think on that whole offense, I really don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know how this offense is going to shake out with other than Kamara. It just there's a lot of variables with it, and I
Yep.
feel like there's a lot of Chris Olave got drafted high, but
Yep.
it's contingent upon Derek Carr throwing him the ball well,
Yep.
and it like obviously he did a fine job last year. That there's no concerns there. Finishes receiver 16, but my question is like, is that where is that the role he's going to be sitting in? We know Garrett Carr. We know what his fantasy value is. He's been this like he's kind of a Daniel Jones character. Like he's been the same mid tier quarterback his entire career.
Yep.
So does that mean he can elevate his receivers game? So that's my question. Is like a lot of people drafted Chris Olave in the probably third, maybe fourth round for a lot of people. And fourth round, you're lucky, right? But it was so. I'm wondering if he is almost like this Jalen Waddle type of draft, where it's like, hey, like the hype was high, he did well, he was, I don't know. And so that's kind of my thought is like, it's more of like the offense itself. Like, does Derek Carr allow Chris Olave to like go to the next level, or is he kind of stuck in this tier that he's at, where he's receiver 15, 16 for the year?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. It's new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak, and Kubiak's offense typically focuses on a wide receiver one, so that should lean to Chris Olave here. So it's a good question though of will that actually be the case. So I'm gonna go deeper here for the Saints, and I'm gonna go kind of the obvious one would be has Kamara reached his ceiling, but I want to kind of go a little bit deeper, and something that I don't think was talked about a lot. I'm gonna go Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill, the bane of the tight end or quarterback existence in fantasy football, and
oh yes,
if you play in some leagues, if he's quarterback eligible or tight end eligible, then it's kind of a cheat code almost for that position. So the reason I'm going to Taysom Hill though is this coaching staff, new offensive coordinator, they met with him in the offseason as personally met with him to say, how do we want to use you? And this is what our plans are for you. And kind of why I'm highlighting that, though, is outside of Kamara, outside of Olave, outside of Rashid Shaheed, it is an aging Jamal Williams that is not really probable to stay healthy all year, and it's not really the most explosive back. You also have Kendrick Miller. While he's a second year back, he's still dealing with a hamstring injury. So that's not boding well for him. Juwan Johnson has not been healthy all offseason either. So we could see Hill being used as fullback or running back option, tight end, or also we know he's able to play that quarterback. So what do we see from Taysom Hill? Is there specialty packages for Hill coming out of this offense, new offense? So that's what I'm looking at.
Good. I like that. Next game, we have the Minnesota Vikings at the New York Giants.
Oh.
So for you, Minnesota, and I'll even give you the easy one if you want to talk about that. But I'll let you pick on Minnesota, what you're looking for from Minnesota's offense this year.
I'll take the easy one on this one, but I am looking at is it Sam Darnold season? And is this is he able to carry that offense? We've seen it's a good offensive system. It comes from the Sean McVay from the Rams, so it's a very good offensive system. We saw Nick Mullins have success in it last year. We've seen it happen where it's not just Kirk Cousins has success, which leads to then receivers having success. So is Sam Darnold turned a new leaf and he's able to be potentially a QB2 So for super flex drafters or a streamer, um, and then can he then feed not just Jefferson, but more than that for the passing? How about you?
Mm, mm. No, that's good. I think that's the big question everybody had right on those first round picks. We talked about that in previous segments of the safe bet in the first
Yep.
round, or you're drafting off based upon potential and ceiling. And Jefferson was brought up several times with just what do you do? A lot of
Yeah.
discussion around where do you draft him, and so yeah, good point there. For me, I'm going to take your route and talk about the running back situation. Aaron Jones coming over from Green Bay, division rival, so that's
Yep.
a little extra layer of juice there for him. For me, though, it's looking at it and saying, I think there's great value with Aaron Jones. I think if you did a zero RB strategy, he would have been perfect to grab in the like sixth round, seventh
Yep.
round or so. Would have been absolutely perfect. Behind him is like Ty Chandler and I think another guy. I think it's CJ Ham. I need to look again at the depth chart, but basically Aaron Jones is the guy right
Yep.
now. The offense, because of QB play, could be limited, but I still think they have enough elite receiver talent that's not going to matter. What's going to be interesting though is I don't. In the past, we saw Aaron Jones used with like an AJ Dillon situation, right? Where it's like there were some games where like Aaron Jones is like, I'm taking the whole week off of practice, and then like I'm playing the equivalent of 2 quarters, and then AJ Dillon comes in and like saves the day fantasy wise and all this stuff, right? So here it's gonna be a little more of a lead back role, I think, for Aaron Jones.
Yep.
So it's gonna be seen like, all right, what value is he gonna bring? Is he going to be that top 10 talent he was in Green Bay, except for last year? So, but I think if you went zero RB, I think fantastic value. I'm really high on Aaron Jones this year if you went the zero RB strategy.
No, I like that. I think that's a good call out for particular draft strategies. How about for the Giants? I'll let you
Mm-hmm.
start with the Giants this time here.
Yeah, I mean, I think and again, I will pick I'll pick the obvious one since you did one for the Vikings, but it's going to
Yeah.
be Neighbors, right? Being the hot pick from LSU, it's going to be okay. You got $40 million quarterback Danny Dimes throwing passes to him, which 5 years ago or 3 years ago, I'm sorry, was great, right? And Daniel Jones has had his best year ever, but my concern is same with Marvin Harrison is like, okay, you got a potential talent at a receiver spot, but you have a mid-range quarterback or a quarterback that gets injured often behind center on a bad team. So that is what I'm looking at. I personally stayed away from him in all my drafts, not because I don't like him, but because I thought the value wasn't there. If he had fallen to me in later rounds, I would have been okay with it. But I think if you got him in like the fifth or sixth round, I think it's a really good value, but he was going earlier. I know with like one PPR leagues, he was going like third or fourth round, which I thought was a little aggressive based upon just he's a rookie with the team.
Yeah, not as aggressive as Marvin Harrison, but I think if we're going talent by
Yes.
talent,
No.
could be right up there with Marvin Harrison. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think Neighbors could actually beat out Harrison in total production this year from their
Yeah.
two rookies standpoint. So I'm actually going to go kind of hot take on that. I think Neighbors outproduces Marvin Harrison this year from
Mm.
just those two production standpoints. From this
Nice. I like that pick.
particular game, yeah, for this particular game, I mean, I'm going to kind of bounce off what you're doing. Is I'm looking to see, does Daniel Jones take a step forward? Does he, you know, do more of what we saw 3 years ago? And I think that kind of goes back to the coaching staff. Is Brian Daboll going to call the offense again? He was brought in. He had success with Josh Allen. So can't now obviously Daniel Jones is not Josh Allen, but can Dayball kind of get the most out of Jones, which then helps the
Mm-hmm.
offense. So
Yeah. Agree. Next game we have here is in my backyard, which a lot of people at my work are excited about, which is the Las Vegas Raiders at the LA Chargers. So,
oh,
Raiders, I'm going to start with the visiting team.
okay.
I'm going to start actually running back. give you full reign of the receiving core and the tight end, but and the quarterback. But for me, I'm looking for Zamir White, and I think he is a fantastic value. Probably drafted between the seventh and ninth rounds in most leagues. Really was the backup to Josh Jacobs all year. When Jacobs got hurt, then Zamir White comes in and plays. And, in the 4 games he played, he didn't score less than 13 fantasy points. He had 13, 16, 17, 18 fantasy points in his 4 games that he played in. Extremely efficient. Efficient is not the word, sorry. Reliable. Efficiency is the concern. He was getting the ball a lot, and for the amount of carries he was getting, it was not a lot of points. He got, over 20 carries in all of his games except for one. So I think for me, it's looking at Zamir White and saying he's a starter on a team that has proclaimed that they want to run the ball more. They want to do more ground and pound. They want to have this revamped defense that's going to smash mouth football everybody. So it's like Zamir White fits that mold. He fits what they want to do.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, are they going to do it, and can he be efficient with his rushes and not run the ball 30 times a game.
No, I like that. And volume may be king, but efficiency definitely helps with what volume you get. So I'm gonna go. We saw on the Raiders, they made the announcement Gardner Minshew won the quarterback job, so not second year Aiden O'Connell. You don't get to see AOC out there. Um, I'm kind of gonna go with, do we see the same Gardner Minshew that we did last year, or was that a product of the environment with the Colts? That you just mentioned, this is a coaching staff that wants to potentially play a lot of ground and pound. They want a lot of good defense. So, and if that's the case, how much does that hurt the production of Devontae Adams, who's already starting on the age apex where he's on the decline? So Adams is still a household name, where that will get him a higher draft capital because, well, he has done this. But I think Adams this year is a wide receiver 2, not a wide receiver 1. So it's going to be kind of a hot take there. And I think that's going to be what I'm looking for, is, do we see that production is more the wide receiver 2 production, not a wide receiver 1 that we're used to seeing from him? So on the LA side, what are you looking at on the LA Chargers side? New head coach, new offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I think that what we're seeing with the Chargers is, they're. I think the biggest problem with the Chargers, they just don't have the weapons they did, and they have a lot of. I'm not calling washed. It's probably a tough term to use, but more or less true on the receivers minus the rookie Lad McConkey. So really, it's going to be is, can McConkey take over that lead role? We've seen Josh Palmer be second or third string receiver behind Mike Williams and Keenan Allen for years and be injured off and on all the time. He hasn't stepped up and taken that when the injuries have happened. So, will McConkey take that role? Will we have a rookie getting most of the passes from Herbert? So to me, it's going to be McConkey and whether or not he can perform up to, like just the standards to get the offense moving from a real football perspective, right? So I think he, for whatever reason, rookie combined with Herbert being injured a little bit in the preseason and other things, like, fell in the 7th to 10th round in a lot of drafts. So I think there was value there in picking a receiver 1 on a team.
Yeah.
There from the Chargers. But, I think the Chargers aren't going to be very good this year, in my opinion. And, it's going to be seeing if McConkey can actually make a difference fantasy-wise.
I think the Chargers, the excitement was all about new head coach, and obviously he's, Harbaugh comes in, had success at Michigan, had success at San Francisco. He's had success everywhere he's gone. And so the question, I think, I'm not going to say this team is going to be that as successful year 1. I think you alluded to it. It's has had injuries, but is this team going to be so run heavy that it limits the value of Herbert or the wide receivers. Um, but again, if there's going to be this run heavy, I question who's going to lead them in the backfield. We have an aging
Yeah.
Gus Edwards who is honestly is just a jag. He's just another guy in this running back room. And we have, while the talent coming out of Ohio State with J.K. Dobbins was there, he's also now off an ACL injury and an Achilles injury. Those are two pretty significant injuries to have to come off of. So it's not the same back we saw coming out of college. So, how much of a committee do we see Kamani Vidal just come in and take over and be the sleeper that was touted all offseason? So I'm going to go with the running back room. Who do we see? I do honestly think it's Vidal, and I don't think it's going to take too many games before he's leading this backfield.
Mm. Denver at Seattle. I will. I'll go first on for Denver.
Okay.
I'm interested to see, honestly, how Bo Nix,
Mm.
now that Sean Payton's picked his guy, how he reacts. It's not a hot take, but what my new information I'm trying to add, I think, is the Broncos receivers. I think are being slept on, and I think that the if you drafted them, you got them at great value. If you looked at like Cortland Sutton, for example, you probably drafted him in the 10th, 11th, 12th round of a draft, if it's like a 10-man league. For receiver one, that's kind of crazy, honestly. So to me,
Yeah.
that's what I'm looking for. Is I think if obviously things will change in the next few weeks, right? Like we'll see how their schedule turns out. Um, they play like Seattle, Pittsburgh, Tampa, and the Jets for the first 4 games. So not like the best schedule when it comes to trying out a new offense, but at the same time, I think there's value you have with those receivers. I think that overall, like we'll see how Bo Nix does. I mean, he's 24. He's not 27 or 28. So we'll see how
Yeah.
that works. But yeah, overall, I if the Bo Nix can do well, I think that the Broncos receivers are going to show an uptake in fantasy value.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of bounce off that too. Where I'm gonna call it specific wide receiver that I think is really being slept on. We all know the piece of information that pretty much everybody has said ad nauseum this offseason is Sean Payton running backs are targeted the most in the NFL. So obviously, that's probably a given where you have Javonte Williams, Julio McLaughlin, and potentially Audric Estime having some value there. But I'm going to say I think either we're sleeping on Marvin Mims as the wide receiver 2, who I think was poorly utilized last year. And I don't know if that was Sean Payton, if that was Russell Wilson, just couldn't throw him the ball. But on very few targets, he turned a lot of production last year. So
Mm.
I think who's the wide receiver 2? And if it's Marvin Mims, I think we're greatly discounting the potential we have with a field stretcher that he is. So that's gonna be my thing I'm watching there with Denver. How about on Seattle?
Yeah, I think Seattle side is going to the running back room. Kenneth Walker. I really like him a lot, especially with if you did more of a probably borderline zero RB strategy. I
Sure.
wouldn't
Yeah.
say. I mean, he was drafted in the 5th to 7th, 8th roundish. So like, I don't think he really qualified for a zero. But in terms of, I think really good value if you had a really good running back and drafted some stud receivers and tight end, and on your 6th pick or 7th pick you wanted to fill out that running back room. I like that a lot. He's finished 18 and 19th overall fantasy wise.
Yep.
So my question is, does Geno Smith, does he take him anywhere on that? Is he going to improve a little bit? It's his 3rd full year in the league, and he's played pretty much full seasons with Seattle both years. So overall, the offense looks roughly the same, right? So to me, like, do we see his value shoot up a little bit? Is the offense more efficient? Are we seeing more of the same? Just kind of questions about Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, no, and does he become a pass catcher that he hasn't had to been utilized that way so far?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna switch to the wide receivers here, and we've seen Tyler Lockett struggle with injuries this offseason. Some of the reports that I've heard, it's a pretty substantial, like lingering one, so we could see him hampered. But does Jackson Smith and Jigba, does he take that second year breakout? You alluded to it with different wide receiver taking a second year leap, making that jump. And I think that's what we want to see is this highly touted wide receiver last year who, for what we would consider, really kind of did nothing for what we thought he was going to do. So I'm going to say, how do we see him perform? Is it him plus DK Metcalf? Is it Metcalf then him? Does he still rotate with Tyler Lockett if he's out there? So I want to see the start of the second year breakout for him if that's going to happen.
Mm, it's good. Next matchup, we have the Cowboys at the Browns.
Ooh, and
So I'll let you talk about them boys first. So who are you looking for?
so don't know if it's hot take or not. I'm curious to see how CeeDee Lamb comes out if he's on a pitch count, if he kind of is slow coming out of the gate. Um, Holdout hammies are a real thing potentially. Of we kind of alluded to a little bit in our late couple weeks of drafting of being aware of, he's not been practicing with the team all off season, and all of a sudden now he's gonna go to playing football. And does that kind of limit his upside initially coming into this season? So similar to guys like Chase, do we see some limitations early on?
Yeah, mine's gonna be on Dak Prescott. Is seeing he was third best quarterback in fantasy last year. He was eighth the year before that. He was eight, and then of course he was in 2019 the second, right? And he was like 14 and 10 and 7 all over the place. So to me, is this a up year, like a bounce? Is this the bounce year for Dak where he's gonna finish like 12 or 11? Or are we seeing him kind of break through in this eighth year situation where he's going to actually do something about it? So
Yeah.
to me, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Is you obviously drafted CD at his ceiling, which you should. He's got the
Yeah.
talent, he's got the potential to do incredible things, but can Dak hold the end of the bargain up, not throw as many interceptions, which he had a problem with a couple years ago, and overall give a shot to be able to go on the field and score more fantasy points. So my thing is Dak. Can he stay healthy? Can he get the ball to CD and this revamped or this like receiver core that's kind of changed a bit with Michael Gallup retiring?
Yeah, no, absolutely. How about the Browns? What are you looking for with the Browns?
I think for the Browns, I'm looking for is Jerome Ford and Nick Chubb, which to me, if you are a if you drafted Nick Chubb, you obviously know what he can do.
Mm-hmm.
But the question that I'm having is, the injury. It could have been, he's obviously still out for this year. He's on the pup list right now. People are saying minimum 4 weeks, but coaching staff said up to 8 weeks, right? So we don't really know how long he's going to be out. So it's just a matter of understanding, like, who's going to take that role. Is Jerome Ford taking that role over full time? Is he going to be in a committee with Deontay Foreman and some other people that are going to be kind of muddle the mix, so to speak? So that's what I'm looking for: is can Jerome Ford take this backfield
Mm.
and honestly just like keep it the whole season, almost like a James Conner, Le'Veon Bell situation where the replacement ends up being as good or better than the original guy, and then obviously with Le'Veon Bell he's up the whole year, but like there was a that kind of situation where like Jerome Ford does so well that when Nick Chubb comes back, they're like, well, we want to have him on a pitch count. We're not going to have him go out full speed, and then so That's what I'm kind of looking for is can Jerome Ford be this RB2 on your team, hopefully, or potential RB1?
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm looking at quarterback position here, and last year Deshaun Watson obviously played with a hurt shoulder, so his production went down. But is outside the shoulder injury, mentally is Deshaun Watson done? Obviously, he's not the favorite person off the field for 99% of fans of football. Um, but has the off field stuff played a toll on his mental state where he's just not the same quarterback that we saw in Houston? And if he's healthy physically this year, does that translate then to he's back? Or is he still dealing with he's just kind of he got his contract and it's just kind of that's it now. This is what it is. So that's kind of what I'm looking at, and I think that will then that's a trickle down effect to all the pass catchers. In that, if Watson's not right, that's gonna be that's not a good situation for the wide receivers. Then, if he is, it is obviously a better one. So that's kind of what I'm
Mm,
looking for.
mm, nice. All right, next game. Washington Commanders at Tampa Bay Bucks. Who do you
Mm.
have for the Commanders? Who are you looking for?
I am honestly, I want to see Jaden Daniels. And is the hype
Mm,
around him from the preseason real? I think fantasy wise, that's kind of the cheat code of having a Russian quarterback. So we all know Daniels is that. So is he able to build that offense and build it up as far as hold it and get value or get production from his wide receivers? Is he able to sustain all that from them? So it's kind of low hanging fruit to say Jaden Daniels, but I think there's
mm.
opportunity. He honestly could outproduce Caleb Williams this year um,
Yep.
with his rushing upside. So I want to see how does he fare with starting against Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I'm in the same vein. Talking about the receiver, Terry McLaurin.
Mm,
He was drafted later in rounds 7, 8, 9, and has always been like a mid 20s receiver, right? Top
yep.
25, top 28 receiver. But he's had a rotation of quarterbacks in
Yep.
Washington. So what I'm looking for here is with Jalen Daniels, is he going to go for the rookie? Is he looking for someone more experienced wants to throw the ball to? Is that an option? Is it going to be the same? Does his running attack give that Washington offense more first downs, more time on the field, more opportunities for McLaurin to do well? So that's what I'm looking for. Is can Terry McLaurin kind of break this top 10 receiver, which I think he's worthy of. I think he's a good enough player. He can get top 10. He just hasn't had, in my personal opinion, the opportunities and other things that other receivers that have had with better quarterback play.
No, I like that. I agree with that. How about for Tampa Bay?
Yeah. Tampa Bay. For me, honestly, it's going to be can Baker Mayfield continue his success with his OC now gone, right? And
Yeah.
so that's what I'm looking for is, he was top 10, he was number 10 quarterback in fantasy last year,
Yep.
which trickled down to a lot of the other skill players. Mike Evans has always been a constant and had his, 7,000 yard season in a row, which is just absolutely insane. But what I'm looking for is can Baker Mayfield keep up that success? He his best year, right, in his like 6 year that he's had at a school, and so to me, that's what I'm looking for: is can he maintain the success? Can he give his receivers a chance to do well fantasy wise?
Yeah, and I mean that's gonna go to if he can. Is it Mike Evans? Is it Chris Godwin?
Mm,
So, or is it both? I'm more looking at. I think if I had to pick one that I'm just going to talk about, it's going to be Rashad White. Last year,
mm,
Rashad White performed very well from a fantasy perspective. It wasn't the most efficient runner, but his work
mm-hmm,
was done more in the pass catching role, where he was fantastic back catching the ball in the backfield. And from a fantasy perspective, especially PPR leagues, that's really what you want. Now, translate that to real football. Is that sustainable this year? Obviously, it's going to be a new offensive system. Do we see that same production? Is it more efficient? And if it is, that's fantastic. But is it the same volume, or is it less efficient? And by less efficient, then does that mean he gives up work to Bucky Irving or somebody else, or do they just not utilize the backs like they did last year with a new offense system? So that's
Yeah.
kind of what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
We got what, 2 games left, right?
Two
Sunday
games
night
left. Yeah.
games,
So
yes.
we have LA Rams at Detroit Lions, a matchup of the divisional game from last year that the Rams lost by 1 point, I believe. So we'll start with LA. What's the player you're looking for, or the hot take you're going for?
I mean, I think hot take. It's not as hot, but I think the Rams could actually win the NFC West. I think they could be dark horse Super Bowl contenders this year if everything goes well. Um, I want to see the use between Kyron Williams and Blake Corum. And
Okay.
Kyron Williams last year, again, I just mentioned, Rashad White not being very efficient. Kyron Williams was a volume play last year. Now, it was a fantastic one where you either were drafting him super late in your drafts or it was a waiver wire pickup, which then turned to RB1 off the waiver wire. Of course, everybody wants to say, yeah, I was able to get an RB1 off the waiver wire. That's very few and far between. Where Kyron has struggled is pass protection. So does he get better with that? And Blake Corum was one of the best pass protectors out of college. So obviously that's to keep Stafford healthy, and they bolstered the offensive line. So, but that's also part of the running back job. So I want to see how does this look. Obviously, the hot take this last week was, Sean McVay came out and said Kyron's going to be doing punt returns. And if you weren't a Kyron Williams fan, that probably just fueled your, see, this is why he's not good. But in reality, it's probably meaning he's getting an extra maybe 3 touches a game where, we've seen high offensive guys be a punt returner as well, and it's not really hurt their value all the time.
Yeah.
So just kind of see, but I want to see how does that backfield play out.
Yeah. I think for me, what I'm looking for is the receiver room. We saw Puka drafted at his ceiling, had one of the best rookie years ever for receiver. So we saw that happen, but then at the same time, we also see Cooper Kupp, who came in from a injury, and so his value is was lower. He was drafted lower than his projected, than what we've seen him perform at. So
Right.
I think there's a combination of Puka was probably drafted a little too high. Kupp was drafted a little lower. So I think from a fantasy perspective, it's like looking at both of those guys and saying, okay, they're probably interchangeable, but seeing who takes the lead role now with both of them healthy. They both have experience now. And, maybe seeing like, all right, hey, maybe Kupp maintains that role and you get great value for him. But I think if you grab Kupp in the 4th round, fantastic value. I think Puka is still a great player, but he was going in the 2nd round for a lot of people. And I think that was a little aggressive for what he did last year.
Yeah, I like that. How about for the Lions?
I think for Lions, what I'm looking for is the Miami Dolphins situation we talked about with HN and Mostert, which is, does David Montgomery, the aging running back who was still drafted super late this year, does he continue to perform at a high fantasy value where you borderline could do the Zeke Pollard strategy with Dallas a few years ago, where you start both of them. You start Gibbs, you start Montgomery in both your slots and let it ride and get 40 points. So to me, that's what I'm looking for is, does Montgomery, is he still performing at a high level? Gibbs is saying he's healthy from his hamstring injury. Does he stay healthy? Does he kind of take more of the lead role, or is it this 1A 1B punch that Detroit uses the whole season?
Nope, I like it. I'm looking at Jameson Williams. Not
Mm.
really been on Jameson Williams the first few years. Obviously, coming off the ACL, he was drafted super high, speed guy out of Alabama, but that limited his year one production. Year two, obviously limited because of suspension for gambling inside the stadium. So, do we see year three breakout, or is it kind of he's been kind of the talk of he's producing as one of the best? So obviously we have Amon Ra and then Sam Laporta, but is Jameson Williams going to step up and be that number two wide receiver, or maybe that number three option as far as pass
Mm.
catchers, or four, depending on if Gibbs is there? So what
Yeah,
does that look
smart.
like for him? So
Mm.
all right, made it to the Monday night game.
Monday night game. Jets at or no, yes, Jets and
Yeah,
Niners.
Jets and
Yes,
Niners.
Jets and Niners. So Jets. I'm gonna go with probably the easy one for the Jets. I think is
Yeah,
Aaron Rodgers and the Jets offense overall. Probably the most obvious take of this whole thing, but can Aaron Rodgers stay healthy? I think he was severely underrated. You have to draft him
mm,
based on past performance, and the injury bug scares ADP more than anything else in fantasy. And Aaron Rodgers has had he's been a top 10 quarterback, minus his 2017 year when he had his I think ACL or something happen in Green Bay. He's been like a top 10 quarterback pretty much every single year that he's been there at in Green Bay. Won multiple MVPs, everything else. So to me, I think his ADP was very low. Hopefully, you grabbed him in in a later round. But yeah, it's gonna be depending upon that whole offense of like how they do, how like can Garrett Wilson maintain his ADP, right? His ceiling of with Aaron Rodgers throwing to him,
yeah,
or are we headed to another year of mediocrity of the Jets offense with a different quarterback?
yeah. Can Aaron Rodgers stay on the field for more than four plays? So
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
I'm gonna go. It's obvious again, but I think it's Brees Hall. And is Brees Hall going to potentially be the RB1 this year? Last year was kind of slow coming out off the ACL, but we saw him be that running back one over the stretch of the final weeks. And if you had him, you were potentially, depending on how you did in your leagues, he was potentially helping you lead to a championship. So is he the is he the running back that's potentially going to pass McCaffrey and maybe Bijan? And is he going to be able to help? Is he going to be that lead back, being a first round pick this year? So I'm interested in seeing what Brees Hall does this year. So
Nice.
on the 49ers side, there's not been any
Mm.
news coming out of the 49ers this year, so it's kind of quiet over
No.
there.
Oh yeah, the most boring football team in America, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think I'm looking at the 49ers and saying, their offense with all their weapons, they've pretty much kept the same offensive core from last year, right? So, um, based on their ADPs, like how do you value Ayuk and Debo and George Kittle? And so, I think to me, it's going to be seeing what Purdy does. Is he going to still kind of be the game manager role where he is giving the ball to his star athletes, letting them do their thing? Is he creating more plays with himself? Obviously they're a very talented team, but I think fantasy wise, it's often tough playing one of those guys at their ADPs, or you're starting them based upon their ADPs, and you might get 30 points from Debo one game, you might get two because George Kittle or Ayuk consumes all of the other targets. So to me, that's what I'm looking for is like, do we see more of a balanced offense, or is it kind of like each man up a different
Mm.
week, and we see a wide swing of fantasy values every week for these players?
Yeah, no, that's good. I think it's a good call out of from real football's perspective, it's good that they have so many playmakers. That's a fantastic thing
Mm-hmm.
to have. From a fantasy side, yeah, it's frustrating. I'm gonna take. I think it's an obvious one, and I think it's being hinted on, but I don't think it's being said quite loud enough. We saw Trent Williams did come back. He got a new contract, so that does bolster the offensive line by getting one of the best or the best tackle in the league back to your line. So that's obviously a good thing both for McCaffrey and for Purdy. On McCaffrey's side, though, I don't think we can ignore past injuries, seasons
Mm,
where he has had very productive seasons when he was with Carolina and been the running back one. He's also a great talent. We can't ignore that fact. And so while being drafted the 101 or early first rounds, he is definitely worth potentially taking a risk on. But coming off of 2 years of very high production, I get a little angst about drafting somebody that potentially could be facing, had a great production last year. So is this the year he kind of has a little bit more tweaking going on with some of soft tissue
mm,
injuries? So it gives me a little hesitation. And we already saw he was dealing with the calf strain obviously, and he came out and said, I would have played had it been the season. That's
mm.
fantastic, but I still get a little worried then with all that going on. It's just kind of not, it doesn't sit right as well. So
Yep.
understand he's
Yeah.
being taken to the ceiling, but there's some concern there.
Yeah, for sure.
But oh man, so we made it through week one, and obviously there's so many more things we could have talked about as far as games or things we were looking for, but it was great hitting on some high level stuff, Grant. So we got a whole weekend of football to hit for now and look forward to and watch.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun, and we're gonna see. I mean, everybody has spent all off season talking about their players, fantasy wise or real football, and it's gonna be really fun to sit down and watch some games, and obviously overreact, and then putting
Yeah,
crazy waiver claims on Tuesday night.
yeah, I think that's probably a good piece of advice of don't overreact to week one. Don't drop your players just because,
Yes.
well, I put a dud out and this guy went off in week one. So trust the draft
Yep.
process. Understand this is 1 week, but react as needed, but don't overreact. I think it's
Yep.
good.
Exactly.
So, well, that will do it for us this time. We'll be back next week though for kind of recapping, but then looking forward to week two with more fantasy advice. Till then, have some fun with week one. Enjoy football, but yeah, don't overreact this week.